the release of Priphanus, the Ark, and Menethos, the Gielinor has been expanded quite a bit in the past couple years. This might leave you wondering, where do we go from here? Well, I'm Crondis, and today we will be discussing the top 10 places in RuneScape we most want to visit. Now, as with all of our other top 10 videos, this list is purely subjective. Feel free to leave your comments and your thoughts down below, but please just keep it polite and simple. Now, for starters, we need to set some criteria based on this list. So I've made out a system that's fourfold. 1. How much interest does this area generate? 2. How much do we know about the area? 3. How much content and story potential does this area have? And 4. What is the need for the player to be in this new area? Now, I've also set a couple of rules to keep this pretty specific to the topic. So, for the first rule, it must be a city, region, or planet. Places like the Inn section of Elemental Workshop don't apply. The second rule is that it must be a new area. This means that expansions to places that we've already visited a significant portion of, like Tardiad and Ubiusk, will not be applicable to this list. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started. Number 10. The Mysterious Continent. Okay, so I might be starting out my list by breaking my own rules here, but just hear me out, and let me explain for a moment. So if we go to the Wise Old Man's house in Draenor Village, we can see that on his globe of Gielinor there are 3 continents. Now, arguments can be made about whether this is just an aesthetics feature, but that's really the only in-game confirmation that we have about other continents existing. There's also that lodestone map from the Tuska event, but that was pretty glitchy. Anyway, so since Gielinor is a planet and planets are spheres, one continent would be to the west of the main continent and one to the east. So for the purpose of this spot, it doesn't really matter which one we choose, west or east, since the reason it exists on this list is for the sheer amount of potential that it has. A new continent would open up an entirely new area for developers to grow their own stories that otherwise would not fit. Complete and total exploration for the player as they take on a new continent, with new challenges and adventures at every turn. Think Amascut, but actually done right. This is why I put the Mysterious Continent on this list. Now, to stay fair to my rules, I did put this at number 10 since it breaks, well, all of them. Number 9. Abana. Alright, now let's get the elephant out the room here. I think we all know why this one is controversial, so let's not beat the dead horse and get on to why I put it on this list. Abana in and of itself has quite a lot of story potential, being so heavily connected with Armadyl, the Aviances, the Elder Gods, possibly Ketsi, and so on. The last remnants of the Avianci race cling to survival on their deadly homeworld, as they await the return of the long-lost god. As the ability to create stories goes, Abana has it, and a new world always brings the feeling of much more expanded universe. So everything sounds well and good, right? Well, this area is brought down to number 9 for quite a few reasons, namely that its opening story thread, dubbed Rite of Passage, is simply a boring idea for a quest. Help a young Avianci collect a bucket of water as his initiation into society. Not only is this just a copy-and-paste initiation story from Tale of the Muspah, reskinned with an Armadyl themed, but it also serves to undermine the extinction of an ancient race in RuneScape lore, which has occurred far too often, honestly. Along with this, the player just doesn't seem to have that great of a reason to go at Abana. There's no threat of mass extinction, no cataclysmic event due to an attacking asshole god, no damsel in distress, not even Evil Dave throwing his bachelor party. Just Armadyl saying, "Can you help me out with this kid?" This isn't a very exciting reason to jump worlds and definitely needs some work before it can gain any points. So while I feel the current era of the story needs some work before being able to properly get rolled out, Abana does earn itself a spot on this list. Oh, and since I mentioned Rite of Passage, it's not been delayed by another month. Number 8. Cassandra. So remember how with Priphanus we were freeing a city from the control of evil tall people? Well, how about freeing a city from the control of evil midgets? Cassandra is the fabled underground city of gnomes, mentioned quite prominently throughout the gnome storyline and had a small portion briefly seen to us in the Prisoner of Glowfree quest. Now, Cassandra falls into the same trap as Abana, unfortunately, having a fairly boring story driving its plot. However, it gains points with the player's increasing need to go there. Glowfree / Glock / whatever we're calling him today, is creating an increasingly dangerous gnome ninjas, and while I can't say that without laughing, We need to stop him from taking his vengeance on the tree gnome village stronghold, as well as all of human society. So while the overarching story may be pretty bland, the stakes are definitely real. Content-wise, we have the ability to open up an entire city for player accessibility, inching us closer and closer to a completed Gielinor, at least for the main continent. Number 7. The Underwater City. All of us have dreamed about living under the water at some point, right? No? Just me? Well then. Our next up is the Underwater City. No! No, we are not talking about that! Get that abomination out of here! No, the real Underwater City is an area mentioned way back in the God Letters as an area who's currently attempting to re-establish connection with surface society. While we haven't had many references to the area since then, a lot of speculation has gone underway as to where and when the Underwater City will be revealed. As far as interest goes, underwater content always seems to be a draw for players. It gives graphics developers a real chance to stretch themselves with unique environments, as seen with the aquarium and the quest that shall not be named but at least looks good. Number 6. The Cursed Archipelago. Do you like Washenko? The Ark? Or what if we take Washenko and we make it cursed? Mentioned quite prominently in the Pirate Quest series, the Cursed Archipelago is an island chain that exists in the Southern Sea, and is presumed to be the location of the series' main antagonist, Rabid Jack. The Cursed Archipelago has the potential to be a legitimately creepy area in the game, sorta like how the islands that once were turtles was supposed to be, but for some reason wasn't. A true horror-themed area with the possibility of starring our evil overlord of life and death himself, Zaltak. Number 5. Terragard. So while you're still laughing and or fuming about Armadillo, let's take a look over at Saradomin's birthplace, Terragard, home of Robert the Strong, or of the Magister, and the origin of all mind. Terragard's potential for story and content is insane. Not only are we opening up another world for expansion, we get to take a look back at the history of humans themselves. A harsh, hostile world that has existed for ages without magic. Their only source for power is a space and time-bending, red lightning-spitting portal known as the Schism. This land is ruled by a hierarchical system of magisters and inquisitor courts that constantly spew false claims about Saradomin, taking control through the fear of him and his absent power. Terragard also holds the possibility of expansions with the Fremennik, who still consider Terragard their home and continue to go to its afterlife. Number 4. Vampirium. Remember in the Lord of Emperium when we were all cock-teased by being able to look out at the top of the castle and see Vampirium's landscape spread out into the distance? Well, how about if we actually went there? Emperium is, if you somehow haven't guessed, the homeworld of the vampires, a land soaked in blood from its rivers to its forest. This place is no joke. Also being only the second world visited by the god Zeros, this area is quite heavily tied into the roots of the game's story. While up until now I've attempted to avoid the "this is how much skilling content can exist" argument for areas, Vampirium is going to have to be my exception, as it would not do the area justice to not mention it. As you can see when looking out into the vast terrain from the top of the castle, Vampirium is a world thriving with new resources just waiting to be discovered. Few areas have the claim to as much skilling and combat potential as Vampirium, as it opens up a world with new resources, new discoveries, new stories, and much, much more. Of course, you have to survive the vampires wanting to kill you while you rummage through their land, but that's part of the challenge, right? Number 3. Infernus. Being the last representative of off-world locations for this list is the demon home itself. Infernus is one of the earliest non-Gielinor worlds we find about in the game, sometimes referred to as the Infernal Dimensions or Pandemonium. We even briefly visit a shard of it in the Shadow of the Storm quest. Opening up Infernus offers the possibilities of expanding demon lore, and allowing us to visit the already confirmed cities of Dis and Bordanzan. With thick ties to both the gods Zeros and Zamorak, a mysterious backstory of infernal demons, the Chthonian rebellion, and much more, Infernus' story potential is some of the highest on this list. Infernus also brings the potential for the graphics artist to go insane. A world of hellfire, brimstone, war, and destruction, with demons of all various kinds lurking around every corner. So get your pyro on, because this place is lit! Okay, that was bad, I'm sorry. Number 2. Acheron. So now that we're done discussing the fiery depths of Infernus, how about we chill out for a minute? Astron is the icy continent to the north of the Fremennik Isles, and home to some of the most unique creatures in the world. We've already experienced a taste of Astron if you've ever visited the Mammoth Iceberg, which is a broken off piece of Astron that has floated southward, trapping some of its residents along for the ride. Astron is most notably referenced throughout the Penguin Quest series, and is the original home of penguins, polar bears, walruses, and many other species. Of all the areas on Astron, the current assumption is that the largest inhabited area is the penguin base known as Palingrad. As with Emperium, I feel it would be unfair to not mention the skilling potential of this area, as we have already gotten a sample of the iceberg. As I mentioned, Astron is home of many unique creatures and resources, all of which could be opened up for accessibility with this area. As story goes, Astron would more than likely be in the pinnacle of the Penguin series, reaching its final climax as we take down Palingrad. Other stories to be told here are yet to be seen, though with the penguins and their shenanigans, the possibilities of this area are always endless. Now before we move on to the number 1 spot, let's take a moment to appreciate a couple honorable mentions. First off is Fossil Island, a landmass to the northeast of the wilderness that contains life from ages long past, a dragonkin, and dinosaurs? Fossil Island has been teased for years as the peak reward for completing the Varrock Museum's Kudos mini-quest, with a barge currently being built just to the north of the dig site. While the area originally held some interest, what really drags it down from the list is Jagex's constant uncertainty about what they truly want to do with the island. It started out as finding a dragonkin on an island full of ancient bones, to something about dinosaurs roaming the island. Every time Jagex seems to talk about Fossil Island, the ideas change and get more complex and ridiculous. Perhaps if we had a more solid idea about what they wanted to do with the area, it would move up, but for now, it'll just stay as a mention. Our other honorable mention is Yaya, the homeworld of the Ilyanka, aka the Dragon Riders. Yaya was first mentioned in the quest One of a Kind, where we learn the history of Hannibus and the dire situation that the Ilyanka were in before the arrival of the god Zeros. What keeps Yaya off the list is the fact that we know almost nothing about it, or if we would ever have a legitimate reason to go. While the Ilyanka story could certainly continue from One of a Kind here, the quest ends with either Hannibus content to dying on Yaya, or attempting to fight his extinction on Gielinor. Because of this, a return to Yaya could feel particularly forced. As for the world itself, we know that the anima has seemingly run out, causing its inhabitants to become infertile. The thought of the graphics artist designing a world that's on the brink of death, though not as horrific as RuneScape, is what gives this area an honorable mention. There's a lot that could be done with graphics-wise here, but unfortunately I'm not sure that will hold the area afloat. So, what took the number 1 spot for the list? Drumroll please! The Skull! Continuing our journey through Wishanko, our next region stop past the Ark is the Skull, home to 8 more islands for you enjoy. AJ, Echo Bay, Honto, the Sunlit Vale, Thalassia, Siren's Shell, Hugie, and the Seeker's Synapse. The Skull is described as a much more rough and tough area than the Ark, with its main export being gunpowder and pirates running the area amok. The story from the Ark even foreshadows us making the journey, with Final Destination ending on a note that Bosun Higgs' brother Jacob has been captured by pirates, taken to the Skull as in need of saving, leading us to the Ark's inevitable sequel. As for content potential, well, I don't really need to speak much of it. The Ark was a great example of what they could do with 8 islands, and just think of what they could do with 8 more. With all this in mind, this is why Skull takes the number 1 spot. Well, what did you think? Do you agree with my list? Would you have put it in a different order? Or were there some places that you believe should have been on this list that weren't? Feel free to share your thoughts down below. And until next time, I've been Crondis, and remember guys, have a great day. This land is ruled by a hierarchical, oh that's gonna be hard, hierarchical, oh Jesus.